Hello Ian, I'm Miss Sutton again with a little bit more on Lord of the Flies. I'm still really only focusing on the very beginning of the story because it's difficult sometimes to get a foothold on what's going on, and your understanding of the story will gain momentum without somebody having to walk you through it as you go on. But I think, as I may have said in my last video, I really struggled to get started with this the first time I read it. So I'm thinking of the kind of help I would have liked to have received when I started reading it, and hopefully this will make the experience of getting into Lord of the Flies a little bit easier for you. So I'm still really only concentrating on this very first bit here, on what we learn. Okay. So what I wanted to look at here is the island, and in my other video I've written this out, but I've had some more ideas about this today. So first of all, I said that in this first bit here we have this idea of the rock coming up, and it seems maybe a bit bonkers to go, well, you know, that could be significant, but it actually, I'll give you this piece of information for free. Rocks are important later. The idea of rock becomes important later in the novel. So where I've got rock there, I'm going to put importance later in the novel. And William Golding may have not even considered, or I'll pop rock at the very beginning of the novel because it's going to be important later, but that's just what it meant to me. You know, he's established that this is a rocky island from the very beginning, and I know later that they become important. Yeah, if I had an exam question, this might never come into my answer, but at least I'm sort of thinking about that now. And then we talked about the bath of heat and how this is oppressive, maybe, perhaps to do with anger and bad temper that will come later, and that it creates an uncomfortable environment. Now, when a writer signals things that come later in a piece of writing, very often it's known as foreshadowing. So it's a little hint at something that will happen later on. So if the island is a bath of heat, does it mean that things are going to get very heated in terms of anger and bad temper later on? So we know that this island has jungle on it. And I'm thinking, well, it's a sort of alien environment. And I mean, I don't mean sort of X-Files alien. I mean the strange environment to the children, these very English schoolboys that have crash landed on the island in this plane. So I'm thinking of perhaps their confusion that they would feel, not just being in an alien environment, but it's an environment that's full of trees. And we also know from what Piggy said that there are creepers, and you might know these as vines, sort of long, quite comparatively thin sort of strands that hang down from trees in tropical areas. So they've sort of got all of these things in the way, and the creepers become really important later on as well. So William Golding describes the island in ways that we don't really understand the significance of to begin with, but we do later on. And then we had this idea that the plane that has crashed into the island and then subsequently rolled away into the sea has left a scar, and how this is to do with injury. It's a word that we often connect with injury. And then this very violent word, smashed. And I said it's perhaps got connotations for our theme of man versus nature. So perhaps our nature theme and our violence theme. And I'm going to add here as well that it foreshadows violence encroaching on normal human behaviour. So I can see that it also has implications for our theme of order and chaos, of being civilised versus being acting in a savage way. So from just that little bit of text, I'm thinking, well, this is a hint at the violence and injury that's to be done later on. Now, still sticking with that very beginning of the text, we also learn that the island has a lagoon. It's a sort of natural almost cut off area of the sea that's like a pool that's mostly separate from the sea, and that makes the island seem ideal, makes it seem perhaps like paradise to me. Now you might have something very different that you'd want to write there, but the boys use this area, this lagoon, as a swimming pool later on. So they use it as a swimming pool. It's an area of fun, but it's also an area where they forget what they're supposed to be doing, but they also act like children there. And you can see why that has implications for our theme of childhood and lost innocence. What they actually forget to do is to keep an eye on the things that they should be doing. They should be keeping an eye on a fire that's there to signal to any passing ships that there are people on the island. Okay, so the lagoon makes the island seem sort of like a children's fun paradise. Okay, but it is also the source of things going wrong quite early on in the story. We also have mention very early on, even in the first paragraph, of a red and yellow bird. And, you know, there is an element of when you first read that of going, well, so what? But red and yellow has connotations of fire. I'm going to put flame there because fire becomes very important later in the story. And also the bird, it flashed. And that's why it also has connotations of flame. Now, I'm not sitting here imagining William Golding writing this going, I must put in some connotations of fire early in the story. But this is what it means to me, and this is why I put interpretation up there. It's possible to say that this hints at the later significance of flame and fire later on. Now, the bird also, it says here, issues a witch-like cry. Now we know that that is a simile. Okay, so the call of the bird, the natural call of the bird, sounds like a witch. And the connotations of the witch are evil, are mystery, are perhaps some kind of magical powers. So if evil, mystery and something that seems magical crop up later on, it could be that William Golding has put some words in, put a simile in that hints at that later on. And again, if you're thinking, I can't buy into that, then you could have that as what somebody else would say, somebody else's interpretation, and put down what you think there. So for me, it's a little hint that whilst this island seems like a paradise, William Golding is warning us that there is also evil present, just the same as when he talks about the jungle, and later on in the opening chapter he'll talk about the creepers, and there are trees there. He's saying that it's not a paradise, it looks a bit like a paradise, and elements of it are really ideal, but actually it's a really unsettling and discomforting place to be. So that's my little interpretation of the island to begin with. If you Google Lord of the Flies Island and you click on images, you'll get different people's interpretations of what the island would look like. Now, when I first read this novel, I found it really helpful to have someone's interpretation of the island. And if you want a little bit more of a relaxed thing to do for Lord of the Flies, especially people who are really good at drawing like Ben, you might decide to draw your own island or create your own island, and as you work through the book, note where different things are. But if you look at an image of the island in Lord of the Flies, you'll see things like the different bits of rock, and you'll notice that they're pink as well. And you'll see the scar smashed into the jungle, okay, that I've written about there, and it might all start to take shape for you. You might have a better chance of imagining the scenes as you read through them. So I really hope that's been helpful so far, and I'll pop more videos together to try and give you a bit of a helping hand as time goes on. So continue to take care of yourselves, and I'll see you very soon.